Everyone, we're going to get started. So first of all, thank you so much for coming this evening. This is the second in a series of 3 lectures this week, addressing issues of indigeneity, transnational indigeneity, and let's say land use, planning and design issues for Indigenous peoples. So this is an important, let's say, series of perspectives on these topics. And 2 weeks from yesterday, we're also going to have a symposium here, a 2-day symposium, dealing with Indigenous perspectives on planning, with a specific focus on the planning of the Fort Garry campus of the University of Manitoba in the context of the new master plan that's been developed and is continuing to be developed. So this is let's say, a series of perspectives that reach out, first of all, across North America, and then bring these perspectives back home to Winnipeg and to the Fort Garry campus. So tonight it's my special pleasure to introduce Vivian Manasc. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio because it's actually so wonderful in so many different ways. She leads Manasc Isaac, a 55-person Alberta-based architectural and engineering studio, is a past president of Architecture Canada, the REIC, and we actually met at the REIC festival last summer, and past VP of the Canadian Green Building Council. Vivian leads the design of many of Manasc Isaac's projects, and it is her vision and skill in facilitating the design process that enables successful projects such as the LEED Gold Water Center in Calgary, Calgary's EOC, the Academic Research Center of Wabasca University, and the Memorial Composite High School for the Parkland School Division, as well as the post-fire reconstruction of the Slave Lake Government Center and Library. She studied architecture at McGill, and then she went on to complete her MBA at the University of Alberta. So a lot of, let's say, savvy business sense here as well as design sense. Vivian's passion and commitment to outstanding sustainable architecture has been recognized nationally, so she's a green building champion. Integrated design facilitation, community engagement, integrating environmental, technical, and cultural aspects of architecture. She's a member of the National Capital Commission Advisory Committee on Design, where she provides advice on architectural and sustainable design aspects of our capital's built environments. Vivian launched Manasc Isaac's Reimagine initiative focused on greening existing buildings, the Blue Sky Award to assist nonprofit organizations to realize their dream facilities, as well as the First Nations Conference on Sustainable Buildings and Communities, and to enhance the quality of the First Nations communities across Canada. So this is where I think this talk intersects our topics of this week and this month. I also want to say, just from a very personal perspective, because I often don't like just reading these sorts of things here. It all sounds very official and very dry. But in my meeting Vivian last summer, I realized very quickly that she's just a totally cool person. I guess I would just simply say that, right? And that was reinforced tonight as well, because as I understand from Brandy, that Vivian couldn't get a cab in front of the Fort Garry Hotel, so rather than saying, come get me or something like that, she just got on a bus and came out here. So, I mean, that's a true commitment to sustainability. Thank you ever so much, Vivian.
Well, thanks, Ralph, for that kind introduction, and thanks to all of you for joining me this evening for this conversation about working in First Nations communities, which is something that we've had the honor and pleasure of doing for many years. And of course, it's also great to be back in Winnipeg, to see many old friends, some colleagues, also former past presidents of RAIC, and other colleagues from the RAIC board who have had the pleasure of working with over many years. And it's also great to be back at the University of Manitoba, where I think the last time I was here, actually I was doing the accreditation visit. I think you must be due for another one, so that probably says it's like 5 years since I've been here. So great to see familiar faces and new friends. Ralph, it's been a delight to meet you and your team here. I want to talk tonight about architecture and building in and with First Nations communities. And I want to start by really saying that this is about stories, and the way that perhaps we're going to share this evening and the next hour that we have together is to talk about storytelling and to talk about how much I've personally learned from working with First Nations communities about stories and about how architecture really reinforces and creates stories. This particular story comes from this lovely little book by Thomas King called The Truth About Stories. And if you haven't read Thomas King, he's absolutely one of my favorite living Canadian writers, and is a brilliant thinker who talks about that it really is all about stories. And this particular story reappears in this thin book a number of times. And so it is with the framing of sharing stories that I'd like to walk you through some of the projects that we've worked on over many years. And we've had the pleasure of working with First Nations communities across Western and Northern Canada for over 30 years now. And so I'm going to share with you just a very few stories, but I hope that they'll kind of link together in a sort of circular fashion. And the framing around these stories is really connected to a Cree framing around the 7 grandfather stories. Now, I'm sure that the similar framing exists in other First Nations, and we've had the opportunity to work with others, but this is the particular one that I've chosen to share with us for this evening. And when many years ago, when we were early working with some of the First Nations communities, one of the councils, one of the chiefs and councils that we were working with said, so explain to me, what is the sequence of making a building? How do you get from like an idea to a building? And of course I did the classical thing that most architects would do. I drew sort of a nice linear bar chart and said, you know, we do schematic design, and then we do design development, then we do construction documents, and then we do construction, and it was all very neat. And the elder looked at me and he said, well, okay, but you don't have it right. He said, the way you're supposed to tell the story is in a circle. And he actually gave me this gift of this framing of the sequence of how we tell the story of how we make buildings. And so really everything that I want to share with you tonight is really a continuation of this idea of a gift culture, where we share our stories, and the stories that were given to me are ones that I will share with you, and hopefully you in turn will share those stories with others. And the way that the story works is that, of course, in our normal focus on designing and building buildings for communities, we do always start with vision. And we start with vision, and then we do planning, and then we do design and drawing, and then we do detailing, or what we call construction documents, and then we build things, and then we move in and celebrate, and then we evaluate or review, and then we start all over again. And so in that circular teaching, it kind of lines up, to my mind, with these 7 stories that, or 7 teachings that are the grandfather teachings, which are courage, love, wisdom, respect, truth, humility, and honesty. And so those are the 7 grandfather teachings that are known, and I think that they line up quite nicely. And so what I thought I would do tonight is really just talk about imagining how we create buildings and sharing sort of anecdotes from specific projects that we were involved in, rather than telling you all about any one project, really just sharing anecdotes about specific aspects of those stories that connect to these 7 teachings or these 7 phases of our work. And hopefully it all comes together and makes sense at the end. One of the things that we believe very much is that, imagining how we co-create schools, healing centers, community facilities, really is grounded in the idea that the vision for these projects comes from the community. The vision really isn't our vision as architects. We are really the interpreters of the vision, but the vision really belongs to the community, and it comes from the children, from the elders, from the teachers, from the parents, from everybody. And we've worked with communities, actually right up here at Peguis, just north of Winnipeg, we worked with the community there to design a school where we had a room much bigger than this with 200 people all doing this kind of thing, magazine collage to share vision. And, in places like Drift Pile, which is in northern Alberta on Lesser Slave Lake, we created places to learn and to teach, and places that resonate for children and for families and for community. And I guess the way that we know that those places resonate is that after all these years we go back and visit, and those places are still there, they're still loved, they're still cared for. So starting with vision, we talk about vision which aligns with that teaching of courage. And that really is what we find is what vision is. The sharing vision that requires courage. And we kind of create the tools that enable the community to share their vision with us. And this isn't just in First Nations communities, it's actually in all kinds of communities. So tonight I'm going to share anecdotes from projects that are both urban projects and on-reserve projects, rural and remote projects, and very, very central projects. Just to start with a little bit of the story of school that we did a long time ago, and it was a school at a place called Saddle Lake in Alberta, and that was in the early 1990s. The school is actually called Kihu Asini, which is which means the eagle child, the eagle rock, which is really the symbol of the school. And as we were working with the community, we started to ask for stories. We started to ask for ways of understanding what the school needed to be. And we were invited to sit with an elder by the name of Peter O'Cheese, who was a wonderful teacher, and who said, well, first of all, you have to ask the question in the right way. So we learned how to bring tobacco, how to ask the question in the right way. And then we were given the story of the eagle child, and the story was really about the child who goes out for a quest to go find who he is and ends up coming back home full circle to find out that he is who he is in his community. And so we asked for a way to interpret that story, and we were told that essentially we can't do anything literal. It had to be abstract. It couldn't be legible except for through telling, because it really belongs, and all of these stories belong to an oral tradition. And the oral tradition really can have props and interpretive elements, but not literal elements. And I kind of like that, because it resonates with a lot of cultures. There are a lot of cultures that don't believe in kind of making literal images, right? Jewish culture, Islamic culture. There are many of the Judeo-Christian cultures that also believe that you don't make graven images, as it were. And it was interesting to hear a lot of that idea that started in traditional First Nations culture. But with our asking for the vision, we were given that story, and we were able to interpret that story in the planning and design of this school. And what's really fascinating is the way that we created essentially patterns on the floor, patterns in the building, patterns in the shape of the building, and through that created a continual telling of that story and retelling of that story. To this day, I mean, I actually know a woman who's now retired as the principal. She was the principal then, but she's retired now and living back in the community. And that story continues, and the school continues to be cared for. So that's a really heartening piece that makes us feel that we were on the right track. And this was a long time ago. And there are many stories like that. But I'm going to continue on. And I'm going to talk about the second phase, which the planning phase. So once we have a kind of a vision, a basic direction, a basic sort of impetus for a project, where do we go with that? What is the planning phase supposed to do? And why do we do it? Why do we create these buildings? Why do we plan them? And this aligns, I think, with that, with the teaching around love. And so the idea that we're really looking for the connection between people, a connection between spaces, a connection between place and building, the connection between community and building. And this time I'm going to share a story that actually is an urban story from Edmonton. And in this case, we weren't specifically just designing a building for First Nations community. It was actually an inner city primary health care facility. And so it was for the larger community, including the First Nations community. And the health authority had decided to buy an old schoolhouse, and there was rather a lot of resistance in the community as to why the health authority might actually want to build a new health center on this site when the community rather liked this little old brick schoolhouse and really rather didn't want anything to be built on this site, and particularly didn't want their green space lost. So we used the planning phase of our process to say, okay, well, we have a vision. Now how do we plan this? Even though there might be community resistance. And so we gathered the community, and we said, how do we take a situation where basically the community didn't want this building? It was almost a sort of a classical NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of a situation, where the community said, okay, go build your health center, sure, but just don't build it in our neighborhood, would you? And the health authority kind of went, yeah, but we've sort of committed to this, and we really do need to know how to do it. But they were very anxious. They were very anxious that we would gather the community together and that there would be voices that they couldn't manage. And we said, well, we'll work with the community, and we'll start with blank sheet of paper. We'll start with open discussion. We'll start with open ideas. Let's find out what it is that the community really needs. What is the community really wants? What is the right